Hello, welcome everybody to this talkback for the international release of the New Gospel. It's hosted by Ente Ghent and the Siegel Center in New York. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If not, I'm very sorry, Frank. Today I'm joined by Milo Rau and Yvan Sagnet. My name's Lily Climenhaga, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the film project that hopefully most of you have been able to watch over this Easter long weekend. So I'm just going to begin with Milo. How would you describe the New Gospel?
It's a hybrid film, so it's half, you could say, a documentary or third documentary, third making of, and third Bible film. So everything is mixed. I had the inspiration to do so because in 2017 it was that Matera, which was nominated Cultural Capital of Europe for 2019, asked me to do a project. And as I knew the film of Pasolini, I knew that Matera is this kind of iconographic place, Jerusalem of Bible films since the 60s or even before Pasolini. And I was working with Maya Morgenstern, so the Holy Mary of Mel Gibson, who did the 2004 film there. So all these reasons made me very sure to do a Jesus film too. And I went there and I saw the situation, and that's the second part of the film. So the social, the political situation around this beautiful Matera, which is not so beautiful. So you have these wild refugee camps there, you have these big monocultures of tomatoes and oranges, and you have that situation that for economical reasons you have 10,000s, 100,000s of people, of refugees, mainly from Africa, which is criminalized by the European and Italian politics. And that's how I understood that I should include that subject. And that's what you see in the film. I know Yvan, so who is with us today, the main activist for the rights of these people, of these immigrants, and of the farm workers. And I asked him humbly if he could consider to play in the film as Jesus. And I was happy enough that he, after thinking a bit about it, because I think it's an unexpected question for everybody, would be, he said yes. And that's how we knew each other in very beginning of 2018. And then we started to work together and develop the whole Rivolta della Dignità and how things, real campaign and let's say historical revolution of which is described in the New Testament came together and started to smoothly connect.
All right, then my next question is for Yvan. Yvan, why did you agree to be a part of the New Gospel project?
No, ho accettato perché
en français, s'il te plaît, pour moi.
Oui, je m'excuse. Oui. Non, j'ai accepté parce que l'idée m'a plu du film, un film sur le Christ d'une part et le documentaire qui regardait la question, les problématiques des pauvres.
So he accepted because he loved the idea to make a Jesus film on the one hand, and on the other hand, a film about the situation of the immigrants.
All right.
You can continue. I just interrupt him to be able to translate.
No, va bene, va bene.
Ah, c'est déjà ça.
Oui, disons.
Okay, pour le moment.
Okay. Great, then for both of you, because Milo, you work even though you are an activist and you have worked as an activist with projects in the past, more recently you work more exclusively as an artist, and your activism is done through an artistic lens. What was then the challenges of working more activistically? And on the flip side of that for Yvan, what were the challenges of, as an activist, finding a way to work artistically for yourself?
I would let answer Yvan first. I just wanted to make a little announcement. So Frank from the Siegel Center, we had many discussions through Zoom also about this film. But it seems that there are some connection problems. That's why he's here, but not talking to us. But I hope soon he will also connect. Yeah, s'il te plaît, Yvan, je te laisse commencer.
Yeah, so then, Milo, why don't you begin? What were some of the challenges that you encountered while working on this project?
Yeah, but let's start. Sorry, I
Sorry.
didn't understand. I just wanted to give that Yvan continues with the question what was the special for him to be as an activist in that project? What was the Yvan, ton micro il est off. Yvan's microphone is off.
Ok. C'est parce que je suis mis à Giacomo dans le...
Yeah.
Ok. Alors, non. Alors, pour moi, quand Milo m'a dit que le film documentaire, c'était pour des acteurs professionnalistes et non professionnalistes, déjà, ça m'a rassuré parce que je ne suis pas un acteur professionnel. Donc, ça, c'est la première des choses. Le fait d'être activiste, pour moi, et pouvoir participer à un projet artistique était un grand défi, une innovation. Mais ce qui m'a poussé, c'était plus le fait de pouvoir transmettre le message, c'est-à-dire d'utiliser l'art et ce docu-film pour pouvoir transmettre nos batailles dans toute l'Europe, dans tout le monde entier.
What tranquilized him somehow in the beginning, or took his nervosity away, was the fact that I presented him the film as a mix of professional actors like these stars, and on the other hand, activists, non-professionals. And he immediately understood that this film as a vehicle somehow to propagate his message throughout Europe, and that for him as an activist, he immediately understood that this would be very interesting for him.
All right, perfect. Then jumping back to my previous question that I accidentally interrupted Yvan with, Milo, for you, what was the challenges that you faced on the ground and the challenges that come with having to work in a more activist and therefore sustainable fashion?
I think first of all, we as an IRPM, but also as an Ghent, so let's say the group of people around me, dramaturgs, activists like Eva Maria Berci or others, we are since many years used to, let's say, link on the one side, let's say, the political power of an artwork, which can propagate an idea, and on the other hand, to try to have a real impact on the ground. And it always takes, of course, a lot of preparation. So, of course, to do this Rivolta or to do this film takes you a long time. I mean, only to work with these people, then be united with the help of Yvan, a lot of different NGOs, people he already knew, like Casa Sankara, like activists from very different groups, because it's a very shattered situation, I would say, and Yvan immediately understood, and we together with him, that we have to bring all these people together. For example, Gianni Fabris, this one leader of the Italian farm workers, and so on. So all these people and it took a lot of time, and it was not simple. And from the beginning on, we wanted to be sustainable, so we work together with lawyers to be sure that nobody will have problems and that people that works with us through the contracts we do with them for the film becomes papers. And we also start with Yvan from the beginning on to work about his project Casa della Dignità and to build up slowly together also with Christiane Lüst and others. So there are so many people involved, you know, that work about over years and years, and artists and activists to build then this distribution network of for the film and parallelly for the products of Yvan. So you could say that the whole process for me as an artist was very diverse. And of course, every week and every month is somehow new. And I remember how Yvan said when we had the premiere in Venice in September, he said, okay, that's one day. That's the premiere of the film, but we will fight many, many, many years longer. And now we are 6 months longer, and in a year we will be a year later, and we started 2 years before, and we will continue to work together until the end of our days, to quote Jesus himself. And that's how it is. So you can't stop a project like this at one moment. I think it's impossible. But of course, I mean, who actually continues and to whom we can give from our side agency, propaganda, perhaps we can help to distribute through the film, is the people on the ground, is Yvan and all the people working with him in Matera and in the whole region in Italy.
Yeah, and I'm aware that after you concluded filming the New Gospel proper, there were a number of additional missions, they were called, that were supposed to happen in different regions, and sort of because of the COVID-19 situation, these missions have been on hold. But where does this go in the future now with the different missions that Yvan is going to carry on and forward as Jesus, and that the project will continue to carry forward with its message?
I think, yeah, but perhaps Yvan can answer. I think there's a little misunderstanding because there's no mission. The only mission was in Palermo.
Okay.
But the real mission is, of course, the distribution of these tomatoes, because, you know, you need a whole system, but he can explain that better. You have to give houses to the people, papers to the people, then you have to find the supermarkets to buy, to sell the tomatoes, and so on and so on. So I think this is the thing we are building up, or help to build up together.
Yeah, then why don't we jump over to Yvan? And Yvan, can you explain to us what is the Houses of Dignity? And can you tell us a little bit about your organization, NoCap, and what it's doing?
Ok. Alors, la Casa della Dignità, c'est un projet qui a donné continuité à l'action que le film disons, a développée. Et aujourd'hui, grâce à la Casa della Dignità, après le film, il y a beaucoup de migrés qui ont pu trouver, par exemple, une maison avec dignité. Et il y a plus des centaines de travailleurs immigrés qui ont pu travailler dans les champs avec des contrats de travail réguliers. Il y a des voitures, des bus que nous avons mis à disposition des travailleurs pour pouvoir atteindre le lieu de travail de manière sûre.
So the Casa della Dignità project is a continuity of what was born in the film, and thanks to the film and this continuation of that project, around 200 workers now have housing, and they also gave to them cars so they can get papers, and with these cars or vans actually they can go to the field to work there. So it's this this whole concept, which is the Gas de l'Unità, which was born in the film campaign.
Disons, la révolte de la dignità, c'est la partie pratique et c'est le futur du film. Donc voilà, le film ne s'est pas seulement arrêté, fermé à l'aspect artistique du terme, mais c'est la continuité, la révolte de la dignité, c'est la continuité de la bataille concrète dans le territoire, dans le pays et où s'est fait le film, et même pas seulement dans le pays. Et on veut le développer à travers le monde.
The Rivolta della Dignità and the Houses of Dignity are part of it, is the practical part of the film. So the film didn't stop with this artistic project, but it continues with the Rivolta della Dignità in the region, in the country, and he also wants to globalize it in other regions.
En ce qui concerne NoCap est une association qui est née pour passer de la protestation à la proposition. Le problème de l'agriculture, de l'exploitation dans le secteur agricole vient des multinationales, vient des grands supermarchés. Ce sont ces multinationales et ces supermarchés qui font les prix des produits. Les prix des produits agricoles ne sont pas faits par les agriculteurs. Ils sont plutôt faits par les supermarchés et les grandes multinationales. Et ce mécanisme.
So NoCap is his organization that went from what he says from protestation to a proposition, which he will explain. And the problem is against what they protested, that the prices are made by the big multinationals and not by the producers themselves.
Voilà. Donc, ce mode de faire de la part des grands supermarchés et des multinationales du secteur alimentaire fait de telle sorte que beaucoup de paysans, beaucoup d'agriculteurs n'ont pas une marge de manœuvre pour pouvoir soutenir certains coûts de production. Voilà, le fait que la tomate coûte 9 centimes au kilo ou bien les oranges 6 centimes au kilo ne permet pas aux producteurs de pouvoir vivre de leur métier. Donc, la seule possibilité de pouvoir survivre, c'est d'exploiter les travailleurs, d'abaisser le coût du travail.
So, when you consider that the price for 1 kilo of tomatoes is 9 cents, 9 cents and 1 kilo of tomatoes is 6 cents, you will understand that the producers can't avoid to exploit their workers, because if not, they would not survive in the system now, where you have the prices dictated by the big multinationals.
Donc, le rôle de NoCap donc, est de chercher de rendre l'agriculture soutenable, c'est-à-dire nous voudrons que tous ceux qui participent à la récolte, à la production des produits, de la nourriture, puissent avoir le respect et la dignité. Nous voudrons que les travailleurs soient payés de manière légale, travaillent de manière digne. Nous voudrons que l'agriculteur, le paysan, ait un prix des produits juste. Nous voudrons que le consommateur final, celui qui achète la nourriture, nous les citoyens qui mangeons tous les jours, avons acheté des produits qui ne dérivent pas, qui ne proviennent pas de l'exploitation et de l'esclavage des travailleurs.
So what NoCap wants to make, his organization, is a completely sustainable chain of production from the producer to the supermarket, so that the consumer will buy products that are produced in a sustainable way of dignity, also for the workers themselves. And that's what he is doing with working all the different points of this whole distribution network. So no slave work, for example.
Donc voilà, notre principale action est contenue, est portée avant par un brand qui s'appelle dans NoCap, que vous pouvez voir dans les étiquettes des produits. Donc voilà, quand vous achetez un produit où il est écrit NoCap, ça veut dire que ce produit vient d'un travail juste, où les travailleurs ont travaillé avec durant des heures raisonnables, ils ont eu une paye légale, ils ont voyagé avec un moyen de transport juste. Ils habitent pas dans les ghettos comme vous avez vu dans les films, mais ils habitent dans une maison juste, voilà, et que le producteur n'a pas été asphyxié par la grande distribution. Voilà, c'est ça le produit No Cap.
So No Cap, you could say, is a brand that you can see on the product. And when you see this brand, and perhaps I can add that thanks to the distribution of the film, we are now in 50 supermarkets in Germany and Austria, and also starting in Switzerland. And when you see this brand on the product, you know that it's work of dignity, well paid, the transports are legal, no mafia included, real housing, no ghettos, and sustainable products in a biological way.
Nous faisons, nos cap à bas un très grand travail social parce que il faut trouver les maisons aux travailleurs, c'est pas facile. Il faut acheter les voitures, trouver les voitures, c'est pas facile. Il faut il faut aller combattre avec la mafia et les caporales pour pouvoir prendre les travailleurs entre leurs mains. Il faut trouver des sociétés agricoles qui ont une certaine conscience, d'une part, et surtout, nos CAP cherchent à sensibiliser le consommateur, que ce soit en Italie, en Allemagne, en Suisse, dans tout le monde, parce que c'est les consommateurs, c'est nous les citoyens qui mangeons tous les jours, qui pourront faire la grande différence dans cette bataille. Parce que chaque fois qu'on va acheter un produit dans un supermarché, il faut toujours se poser des questions, mais ce produit, cette tomate que j'achète, par exemple, où ça vient, qui l'a produit, comment il a été récolté. Voilà, la conscience du citoyen consommateur fera la différence.
So, No Cap means a whole network of sustainability and dignity. That means that the housing, the transport. So he explained again this whole system, and he says, and that's the point, that actually the consumer, if he's awakened and sensitive to it through different, for example, the film, he can make the change by buying this product actually and investing in this new network and in the housing and in the legalization and in the fight against mafia. So it's all about what we consume in the supermarket.
And how can a North American audience who can't necessarily buy the products yet contribute to No Cap and contribute to this ethical consumerism?
E come potrebbero I consumatori degli Stati Uniti
Yvan, c'est à toi là. Tu as eu la traduction? Le micro, ton micro il est off.
Ce n'est pas facile la transcription. Oui, les consommateurs américains peuvent donner une grande aide à cette bataille en nous écrivant, par exemple, pour pouvoir distribuer les produits de No Cap dans les différents coins, supermarchés, boutiques alimentaires aux États-Unis. Et il y a beaucoup de citoyens américains qui achètent des produits italiens. Voilà, et il faudrait que ces citoyens américains puissent être très, très durs, lire l'étiquette et demander surtout que les revendeurs, ces supermarchés puissent s'assurer que ces produits qui viennent d'Italie, et pas seulement d'Italie, parce que l'exploitation, c'est un système mondial, et que les produits soient tracés, soient voilà, bien. Et par exemple, en Allemagne, avec notre activiste Christian Lust et beaucoup d'autres activistes, c'est comme ça, on est parti de rien, de zéro. C'est les citoyens qui demandaient les produits. Ils ont organisé des groupes d'achat. Et voilà, aujourd'hui, en Allemagne, par exemple, les produits No Cap sont en train d'entrer dans le marché. On peut faire la même chose. Les citoyens américains peuvent nous aider. Parce que cette bataille, ce n'est pas seulement pour l'Italie, pour l'Europe, mais c'est une bataille du monde entier.
So it's not a fight only for Italy or for Europe. It's of course also a North American fight, because the Americans buy a lot of products from Italy. So what happened and he quoted again Christiane Lust, who is working together with us to form groups of consumers to bring it in the supermarkets and to really land the products of Yvan in the kind of the official system that you could go in the supermarket and find it. And that's how it starts. So citizens form this group, they ask for these products, the products are imported and sold, and then they're in the normal system like with every new product. And if you want to do that, of course, if there is enough people, then it can be done.
So Milo, for a question for you, what?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Frank.
Do you hear me? For a moment. So hello, and hello from New York City here, where it's still sunny Easter afternoon. I apologize. There are some problems across the Atlantic. Milo and Jalib, you can hear me, and also Yvan, welcome, and so honored to be part of it. Question for Milo, if you hear me. One very great art from Carol Martin.
I don't get it, Frank. It's too, perhaps you understand it. I don't get it. It's too fragmented.
Okay, let's forget it.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting some feedback.
Yeah.
What's the best case scenario outcome for you from this project?
I personally never experienced such a success, you could say, story like this project, where activism or these networks of distribution of products or tomatoes actually, and on the other hand the distribution of a film was so closely linked and so synergetically working together to realize what Yvan was describing, that we have now all these supermarkets, for example. And in general, I can say the scenario is always something you have to create around a project. So that, for example, a project is not only a film that you can watch, a project is also the production process. So how do you organize that? It's also a distribution process. We were talking about the distribution of the products of Yvan, and the people around Matera, and this is the important thing. But it's also a film that it is distributed, you know. And of course, we were in the moment of the shutdown. We were asking ourselves, are we going now to Netflix or to Amazon, or what are we doing? And then we created a bit the same thing that he creates for his tomatoes for the film. We created a platform together with 100 closed, or now 150 closed cinemas, to sell the tickets on that platform through this, that you can virtually go to the closed cinemas and support them. And it's a completely independent system from the classical system of streaming. And so for us, I mean, I think for me the scenario, the more I go on with that project, becomes a project of distribution, of how you produce meaning, and how you produce other ways of selling art. very simply, of selling products, because a film is a product too. There are tomato cans and there is a 200 minutes Jesus film, and you can, how do you, you know, to whom gets the money? Who gets it? Who is it? Who is it? And now we have, if you watch this film, you bought a ticket, the money goes after the deduction. Of course, you have to pay a bit the platform, etc. But most of it goes to the closed cinemas. So it's really and that's also the idea that Yvan has, that when you go to the supermarket and you buy a can of tomatoes, it's not 99% goes to Lidl and like 1% somehow goes to the slave workers. No, it's that really the highest amount of it goes to the producer, goes to the people that needs it, that there is a sustainability in the distribution. And that's for me the important thing when we talk about this film from a production point of view, from a structural point of view.
And is this something that you're going to carry forward with your next film or with other artistic projects?
Yes, I think this is the main mission. It's not about. I'm already an artistic director of the theater, and we made a manifesto some years ago. And there I was saying in some points of this manifesto, it's not about the product; it's about the production process. I mean, and the more and more I work on it, it's about changing the production process. It's about changing the means. It's about empower people. It's about having another distribution process. And especially, of course, in a Jesus film, you can make a Jesus film that is unfairly distributed and unfairly produced, but you can fail. You can make mistakes. We are not. I mean, Yvan is perhaps he's Jesus, but I'm only a filmmaker, you know. So I can't. We try to do our best, but I think it's about this. It's really the message and the way you transmit the message have to somehow to click, and it's not. That's not a new idea, I know very well, but still you could ask, but why do we have Netflix, Amazon? Why do we have these big supermarkets, big supernationals? Why do we have slavery work? Why, etc., etc.? So we have to find ways to connect what we want to do. We want to have fairly paid people with papers, etc. And what we know and what we want and what we do. And your question was very good. What can we do? Actually, and I think we have together to create ways of doing the right thing, that we can do it.
So let's jump into that making of process that you engage with in your work, because in your production in the New Gospel, you show not just reenactments in that very classic Passionspiel way, but you see Yvan actually rehearsing a scene and then sometimes forgetting the lines or making mistakes or just rehearsing with another actor. Why include that?
I will answer very shortly, because then I have to go and take my charger, or it's even over for me. So I think it was for me again more interesting to you know, a Jesus film is a boring thing, because iconographically the storyline, everything is known. The question is, how do you tell that story, and how do you make transparent how the story is produced, or how click, you know, this very complex book that shows the complexity or the impossibility even of revolution against the empire, the capitalist empire of Rome, the problem of solidarity, the impossibility of transcendence, and all that. How can you show that, you know, the practice of it, the making of it, the impossibility of make it, trying to make it and failing and trying again, and that's what the film is about on all levels. It's a film that is kind of, you could say, in the form and in the content tries to find I mean, it's this old form content discussion, of course, but you have that tries to change the medium of narration, the medium of distribution, the medium of production, the medium of collaboration, the medium of sustainability, and also the medium of failure, and all in one. And that's what we try, and that's why some people think that the film is a bit chaotic, and that's true. So, but now I'm a second away for the charger.
Okay.
And you can perhaps you ask your next question to Yvan.
Yeah,
And
I can ask Yvan.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, so Yvan, with that same idea, how was it seeing yourself on screen and seeing yourself in those moments acting as Jesus, and also seeing the rehearsal aspect of you learning how to be Jesus?
No, mi ha fatto un effetto strano all'inizio, perché non ero abituato. Però oui, excusez-moi, excuse-moi. Je disais, j'entendais dire, je le rôle de Jésus. Et pour moi, c'était un honneur parce que je suis de religion, je crois à la religion, je crois en Dieu. Et représenter Jésus, pour moi, c'était un honneur de le faire. En ce qui concerne la partie activiste, c'était également pour moi une opportunité de pouvoir, comme je disais, parler de ma bataille, parler de la bataille des pauvres à travers cet art, comme j'ai dit avant. Et j'ai eu des sensations bizarres, positivement, parce que se retrouver devant la caméra tout le temps en train de réciter et tout ça, voilà. C'était quelque chose de très, très stimulant. Et au début, je n'étais pas à l'aise, très à l'aise, parce que je pensais que c'était un film, un docu-film qui était très, très exigeant, où on te demandait comme acteur d'être très, très professionnel, très, très. Et puis bon, voilà, avec Milo Rau, c'est cool, quoi. C'est cool, voilà. Plus les jours passeraient, il m'a rassuré, voilà, j'étais devenu moi-même et voilà.
So I think I came back in a good moment in the beginning. So I translate. He says, as he is a Catholic and a believer, of course, it was an honor to be asked to play that role. As an activist, as he said before, he immediately understood that this would be a channel for him to transmit the message of the fight for the poor. So, and practically working as an actor in the beginning, it was a bit destabilizing, but then because it was very demanding, it's a complex film and a complex role, but he says that Milo Rau, so myself, I tried to make him understand that, that he can do it, and from day to day he did it, and yeah.
You performed it brilliantly, Yvan, truly.
C'est brillant, ton rôle, c'est brillant.
Merci, merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump into a few of the specific moments in the film, and probably the moment that you've been spoken to the most about, Milo, is the casting of the Roman soldier. With this sort of absurd scene where somebody beats up a chair for what feels like hours, but is in reality probably only about 2 to 3 minutes. How did that come about? What directions were given? What directions weren't given?
We tried it as everything in the film to make it very transparent. So all these castings, we gave quite clear directions. For example, for him, it was this chair is Jesus. take the whip and torture him. And you hate him because you are frustrated, because you are a soldier, you are waiting for so many time now to be in war, but you can't. And now you have this person, and you are also a bit afraid, and you hate him. And that's what we explained. And as a direction, like in every improvisation, you would more or less make it like that. And the interesting thing is, he's an actor. Like many, I think most of the people that came from Matera were actors or semi-actors or people or extras. And the interesting thing is what then he did, and not as a person, but as somebody like me or you or everybody here who is listening could have done, that if you have asked him, torture now the Black Jesus, why do we have all these rhetorics ready in our society? Why do we know what has to be done, what has to be said? You know, of course, he's a talented actor, and he knows better because he knows it better improvised than perhaps us. But the question is, how do we have structurally the possibility to know all that? And I think I would have done the same, and I'm not a racist, you know, and that's not the question. And then you understand, and for me it was very important, and it's something I'm missing in the film of Pasolini, but it was another time. It's the structural violence, because we are talking now the whole evening about 500,000 of slaves that are treated like animals, but you can't picture this violence. But you see it break it out at that very moment, and that's for me the strength, of course, of acting, of metaphorically represent something through somebody who plays it and is it in the same time as we all play and are our very often sad social reality. And I think there you see in what we are locked, and you see at the same time what we can do. And I think that's why I often use this approach to find out what we really know, and in what nightmare we are really living, why we are trying to tell beautiful stories about it.
You say something interesting there in that the fact that there are 500,000, if not more, slaves in Italy alone is something that we can't imagine. And yet in that torture scene, you show us that we actually can imagine it, and we actually do know these images because of the image of Yvon's back after the scene of torture is almost a reenactment of the famous image of an African-American slave's back from the mid to late 1800s. And that's such a stark image because it suddenly catapults us into how this violence hasn't changed and how it continues.
I completely agree. I think it's the capitalism has two things in its core. And that's what I learned in that project, and of course also in other projects. For me, it's racism and it's sexism. These are two things that you would find from the Roman ages until today. And that's the shocking thing. If you take the New Testament and you adapt it today, people doesn't even know if this is improvisation or the word of the book, because you can use it. It's the same system, you know. We changed I think that superficially it's always moving, and we have democracy and we have whatever we have. But when you go a bit inside this system of exploitation, nothing changes, and racism is in the core of it, especially in our time. And it's completely shocking, and it's sad, and it's a tragedy of our species. I don't know. It's really of this system we created, and what Yvan is doing, and what Jesus, of course, is doing in the book, is to try to revolt, not against the priests or against whoever, but against the whole system everybody is in. and it's, of course, it's a transcendental rebellion, and which has many points. And one point, of course, is the economical basis on which we are dreaming and improvising, and because the things that this guy says in this torture scene, so you die in the water, only your chef is white, etc., etc. I mean, these are all realities of the system. It's not that he's like a very, very bad guy who would invent like that you let die thousands and thousands of people in the water, that you criminalize them, and that you dehumanize them. It's just the reality, you know? And yeah.
Yeah, it's that problem that it's not a metaphor, what we see on the screen. None of it's a metaphor because it just is. This isn't a metaphor for racism. This is just the racism that is inherent within the current capitalist and consumer-based economy and world that we live within. And there's something very troubling about seeing that brought to the screen and seeing how easily this rhetoric comes out of people.
I would have one question to Yvan about it, because we didn't really talk so much about racism, for example, during the project, because we are both Marxists, and I think for us, we are always going through the economics of how people are related one to the other through work, for example, or as citizens or non-citizens. And I would be interested to know from Yvan what for him is actually the meaning of being in European film, so to say, not only as a Catholic and as a Marxist fighter, Jesus, but also as somebody who comes from Africa. So what does it mean to what once was written about in the film to be the first black Jesus of European film? I mean, what does this mean, besides all the other meanings this film, of course, has? As a statement or a...
Être le premier Jésus noir dans l'histoire du cinéma, c'est quelque chose de très très fort, de très très important. Parce que cela va changer la configuration de l'image de la religion aujourd'hui. Je pense que le fait que beaucoup de politiciens, la politique instrumentalise la religion, grâce à ce film aujourd'hui, on pourra dire, voilà, on s'est libéré, un peu, on est en train de se libérer de cette instrumentalisation. Pourquoi? Je prends un exemple. On nous a toujours enseigné que Jésus est noir, blanc, pardon. Jésus est blanc avec les yeux bleus, les cheveux longs et tout ça. Jésus, c'est pas l'image. Jésus, c'est pas la chair. Jésus, pour moi, est universel. Il est universel. Jésus, il est blanc, il est noir, il est jaune, il est rouge aujourd'hui. Et Jésus, aujourd'hui, s'il était entre nous, après 2000 ans, Jésus serait avec qui? Je pense que Jésus serait avec les pauvres, pas avec les puissants. Il serait avec le peuple, avec les pauvres. Il serait avec les noirs, il serait avec les immigrés, il serait avec les gens qui souffrent, il serait avec voilà, des gens qui ont des problèmes, des gens normaux. Jésus, dans son message aujourd'hui, aurait défendu le même message que nous sommes en train de défendre. C'est-à-dire que le monde est universel, il faut accueillir. On ne peut pas être un citoyen américain et dire, voilà, je ne veux pas accueillir les réfugiés, les citoyens mexicains qui traversent la frontière, ou bien je ne peux pas dire, je suis en Europe, mais il y a des gens qui viennent de l'Afrique, d'autres pays, qui fuient les guerres, qui ont besoin d'aide, on ne les accueille pas. Jésus allait dire, à ces citoyens occidentaux que la première des choses qu'il faut faire, c'est accueillir les personnes parce que voilà, c'est le message de fraternité que le Christ, il y a de cela 2000 ans aujourd'hui, allait toujours faire.
So Yvan starts saying that in his opinion, being the first black Jesus in European film is a very, very strong signal and will change completely the transfiguration of how we imagine Jesus and how we imagine religion, because he thinks that at this very moment, and especially in Italy, religion is used for right-wing populist politics, and to change it, turn it completely around and say, no, we are living in a globalized universal world and we need a globalized Jesus, and we have really, there is no skin color of Jesus. The question is, with whom would Jesus be? How would Jesus act? And in his opinion, Jesus would completely and exactly do what he does in his film as Jesus. That means fighting for the poor, fighting for the immigrants, fighting for the homeless people, fighting for the people that arrives. And the big question, for example, for North America, of course, the Mexicans, or the people from South America, and for Europe, the people coming from Africa and from the Middle East, how do we treat with them? What is our philosophy about it? And he thinks there we have to give an example, and we have to say, no, Jesus is not a man with the blonde hair and perhaps blue eyes, how in Europe strangely he is represented. But no, he's black. He's perhaps red and white or whatever. But he's the universal principle of dignity and humanity, and that's what he wants to show by turning around the meaning of this populist right-wing religion that we have in Europe.
Oui. Pour répondre spécifiquement à la demande du marxisme, nous sommes dans un classique cas de marxisme parce que le film fait une lutte entre les patrons, contre les patrons, les travailleurs contre les patrons, les patrons contre les travailleurs contre les puissants. Les puissants, ce sont les politiciens qui ferment les frontières. Les patrons, ce sont les supermarchés qui exploitent les agriculteurs. Les patrons, ce sont les multinationales qui gouvernent le monde. Les patrons, c'est ceux qui font la corruption, qui ont de l'argent et vont corrompre le peuple. Les patrons, ce sont ces grandes puissances qui alimentent les guerres. Donc, dans le film, aujourd'hui, dit, voilà, Jésus serait un marxiste parce que Jésus serait avec les classes populaires, serait avec le peuple, serait avec les travailleurs, serait avec les immigrés, serait avec les agriculteurs, contre ces puissants qui ont une pensée qui est contre la pensée de Jésus. Voilà, c'est un concept de classe, ce film.
And that's a very interesting thought that from a Marxist point of view, of course, it's a Marxist film and it has a conception of class struggle of Jesus. So the question is, with whom, with which class would Jesus be? And he would be against what he calls the bosses. So for example, the multinationals that don't pay, that exploit, or the governments that close the frontiers. Jesus in our film, and I think Jesus, if he would come back really today, he would be with the fourth estate. So he would be with the class populaire, so with the popular classes.
Yes, and you bring up an important point, is that while there are a very small number of films that feature a Black Jesus, it is a shockingly small number. And what is the hesitation of pushing back against this absurd whiteness that's been put on Jesus, both in film and in theater and in art in general?
I think personally, and but I'm talking from a structural point of view, that only white European, North American people has the money to make a Jesus film, and then they take a European actor which is white, and that's it. I mean, it's the system produces itself or reproduces the images of itself, and I think that's one very, of course, very obvious reason. So I perhaps I don't even have to mention it, because I don't think that there is a. I'm not sure, but perhaps I don't think that there is a kind of a image politics paranoid plan behind it to only reproduce the same racist images all the time. I think, and it's even worse. Huh? Like in the Soldier, which is actually a left-wing guy torturing the chair, that it is unconsciously reproduced. It's not that we want to reproduce it, and that's also why. And I think that's why we have to change these images, that they become common, and that the black Jesus, and that's what one apostle at one moment said, you know, we already won, because the black Jesus is there, and if the second and third and fourth in European film now comes, nobody will care about it, because it's just normal now. And I even saw it in the kind of the critique that was made about the film. When we were shooting it, it was a big issue. The media was talking about it, and today, still in Venice, and still perhaps around Christmas, but now this black Jesus thing is not so central anymore, as if people already started to accept it somehow, and that's already a step.
When you create a political theater piece that engages directly with issues of racism and issues of exploitation, how do you prevent the art piece itself from taking part in that same system, though, of profiting off of the suffering of others? And I know you talk about this at length in The Clemency of Titus, but is there such a thing of ethical art?
I think we can, but I quote Yvan. He said, je crois, de la critique à la proposition, from the critique to the proposition, and from the revolution to the reform. So, of course, you have to propose another distribution system. You can't distribute in the same system that you criticize the message, the new message. It would be a contradiction. And that's something I only start understanding now. Even as a Marxist, I didn't understand it. But now I start understanding it, that you need, for new ideas, you need new institutions. For new images, you need new consumers, new way of distributing it, new supermarkets. You know, you can't distribute dignity through a network of slavery. It makes completely no sense. And it's a whole, that's the complexity of it. And that's what makes you crazy. And that's and that's something I learned really from practical Marxists, like, because I am an intellectual, I'm producing images, you know, and even is producing tomatoes. And of course, there you really ask yourself, it's very clear and very practical, and you see immediately what you do. And I think if you are working as an artist, you can live in a bubble where you would kind of looking into mirrors all the time, that you would not understand what you really do. And stepping out of it and working together with people that is really working on the ground teaches me practically a lot. and the last thing, we were quite happy that there was the lockdown, because there you were confronted that the whole distribution system collapsed for a moment, not for so long time, but it was kind of a little shift where you understood, aha, we could create our own platform. We could, you know.
Well, and this will happen again with the book now that in a few weeks, when we'll feel what happened with the Suez Canal, of what happens when one tiny thing breaks for a second.
Yeah.
Why did you end the film where you did? Because I know that you filmed a number of scenes after Matera. There was, for example, the assembly that took place in Rome. And then you also filmed Yvan's Jesus being taken down from the cross, I believe, in the Vatican. if I remember that correctly. So why end the film there?
Not in the Vatican, in the National Theatre
Oh, yeah.
in Rome. Yeah, let's say close to the Vatican.
The Vatican of theaters, let's say. But why end there? Why not include the testimonies that were spoken or the performance of taking down Jesus from the cross and the resurrection?
I mean, I will ask this to Yvan. I can only say one sentence. I didn't believe in these images. They are beautiful images, but for me, the resurrection of Jesus was something that happens in the acts and not in an image. And I didn't want to produce an image of resurrection. We have to produce the reality of resurrection. I mean, this film, another film like Pasolini, it's beautiful to see Jesus walk, and it works, because it's somehow a more esoteric film. But we wanted to change reality, and I wanted to change, because there is a resurrection in the end credits. You see what happened. You see the Casa della Dignità. You see the No Cup brand arriving in the supermarkets. You see that stuff. So, but perhaps we can ask this to Yvan. What is for him the resurrection of Jesus in this kind of Marxist film? Because he's also a believer. I'm not, so that's a big difference too.
Bon, pour moi, la résurrection, c'est la conscience collective. La résurrection, pour moi, c'est les faits. Ce sont les faits. C'est-à-dire que c'est qu'on a réussi à produire avec ce film sur le plan artistique. Est-ce que grâce à ce film, des gens ont pu avoir une certaine conscience sur les problèmes que le film a soulevés, oui ou non? Si c'est oui, alors ça veut dire que c'est une résurrection de ces personnes qui étaient totalement dans l'indifférence dans le passé, c'est-à-dire qui ne connaissaient pas ces problèmes, de foi qui s'en foutaient. Et si grâce au film, ils ont pu prendre une conscience de ces problèmes, alors c'est un grand pas, c'est une résurrection de la personne. La résurrection, également, c'est les faits, comme je disais, c'est-à-dire que les faits matériels, le travail qu'on a donné aux personnes, la maison et tout. C'est ça pour moi, la résurrection sur le plan artistique, c'est-à-dire que sur le plan culturel, sur le plan moral et également sur le plan des faits concrets.
So, in the first part, Yvan said something he never told me before, and I think it's extremely interesting, and I never was thinking about it, but that's an intro. So he says, resurrection, on the one hand, for him is collective awareness. And what resurrects is the person of the viewer. It's the humanity of the viewer if he gets aware of the message. The resurrection is the viewer. The viewer resurrects. And that's the person of the viewer. And this is a super deep thought about the impact of art that I like a lot. And on the other hand, of course, the acts, the facts, the house of dignity that all these people has work, what you see. So what the film and the project kind of just had as a consequence on the ground is, of course, also the resurrection of the revolt of dignity.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the revolt of dignity and dignity in general, but we haven't. How would both you, Milo, and you, Yvan, define dignity, and how does this concept need to develop as we move forward?
I give it to you, Yvan, first.
pour moi, la dignité, c'est l'être humain dans tout son état, dans le fait qu'il puisse résoudre ses problèmes, qu'il puisse être satisfait dans sa vie. C'est ça, pour moi, la dignité. La dignité, c'est également le respect de tout être humain comme il est, quelle que soit sa religion, quelle que soit sa provenance. Le respect que la société donne à cet être humain. La dignité, c'est le fait que je puisse travailler sans être exploité. C'est ça la dignité. La dignité, voilà, c'est le respect de tout ce qu'on fait, de tout le respect que la société offre à chacun des citoyens pour qu'ils puissent jouir de façon juste de son futur, de son travail, de sa prospérité. C'est ça pour moi la dignité.
The dignity for him is the human being in all its complexity, and that it can realize itself. We need a society that respects this complexity, the humanity, the dignity of every being, and that's what we have to work. He gave the example again of working conditions. If you don't have working conditions of dignity, how would you realize yourself as a human being in it? So it's impossible. And so there are two sides of dignity: the fact that human beings have dignity, and the fact that society has to respect it and have a space where it can realize itself.
La révolte de la dignité, c'est ce processus concret qui pourra porter à plus de dignité, qui cherche à donner plus de dignité aux personnes qui aujourd'hui sont sans dignité. Voilà. Donc, c'est ça la révolte de la dignité. C'est un instrument pour pouvoir redonner la dignité aux êtres humains, aux personnes.
And the revolt of dignity that is described and acted out in the film and after the film is a revolt for actually this quality of dignity, trying to give it back to all these human beings. That's the revolt of dignity. It's not something abstract and philosophical. It's really the act of giving the condition of dignity back.
Beautifully put.
I don't have to add anything to it. I completely agree.
No, and it's so well put, it's hard to add anything to it. I'm going to turn over a little bit to audience questions and see if anyone on Facebook or elsewhere has questions at the moment, and if not.
I also watch it and again, for example.
Yeah, I don't see any at the moment. Then I'll just go. Milo, you appear in the film as well, as not necessarily a central character, but as somebody who has to be guided through and goes through his own learning experience about what's happening. Why did you choose to include yourself in the film, and why in this capacity?
There are different reasons. That's a complex question, because how would you include yourself as the director who actually tries to create for others a frame to realize themselves, for example, in improvisation or in a scene? How would you bring yourself into it? And I always had this strange feeling, and very especially here, because the collaboration with Yvan was a very close one, and he's shown in his weakness, in his struggle, in his wisdom, but also in his doubts. Why would I exclude myself to a process to which I expose all the others, and especially, of course, Yvan, so much. Why would I, for example, exclude the problems that appear in between art and activism, the problems that appear in, an old discussion in representing violence, in being a non-believer making a Jesus film, so all the things that that for me are part of it, because you have to consider that the Bible, the New Testament, and that's very strange actually, is a multi-layered, multi-perspective way of narration. You have different gospels, contradictory gospels. They don't say the same. In one you have violence, in the other not. In the one Jesus says this, in the other one this, etc. So you have an extremely complex way of telling the story. And sometimes you feel that somebody is talking, somebody you have the impression it's just a kind of a document. And it shifts. And that's also something I wanted to experience as a way of narration. And and I think that's it.
All right, here's a question from the audience for you, Milo. It says, Milo, would you say this is your strongest or perhaps most applicable Marxist film or project?
I like so much that that they accepted now that it is a Marxist film, because I'm a bit doubting about this. I can just say again that the film only started, and the whole project of bringing what Yvan said before, to land this Rivolta della Dignità, of course in the film, in talking about the film, in all these projects we were describing, the distribution of tomatoes and artworks, and investing the money we make with it in more dignity and in more art and in more, and in another distribution. So of course in that way it's the most, but it's something that is really developing itself, that I am it's unveiling itself at the very moment what this kind of system is. And I think we as a whole civilization, but now I become a bit esoteric too, are in a transformative process from one, I really hope, from one way of going more into indignity and developing a rhetorics of dignity more and more without connecting it anymore to another system where we try, like in a dream, to, however, connect it with films and with what we buy in supermarkets, and how we talk to each other, and how we try to explain to ourselves what our profound doubts of the way we are producing reality and dignity in that very moment is, and of course going to this kind of basic myths of this so-called civilization we are living in, or one of which is the Bible. Of course, then you go very basic, and you go more basic than when you do a Chekhov play, just because everything is somehow in, and you feel that you somehow have to take a position to it, and that's why but I don't know yet. And can I have one question for Yvan, which is perhaps a bit linked to it, because I was thinking about when I was so Yvan, because I don't know, Yvan, do you think that how all this is developing itself? And I think I didn't expect this, that we would go so far with that project, and one day after the other, and now for sometimes with so many people. I mentioned some of those, Christiane or Eva or Heini Staudinger and Giacomo, and who is translating, and and the Casa Sankara and all these people, that this would construct itself like this when the first time we met and we were in Matera and we said, let's do a Jesus film. Did you expect that? Or is it a bit like, because I can't answer to it now. It's not really a question, but it's really it's more a question about an experience you would make in a project. Because still, for me, normally a project means that you start somewhere and then you finish somewhere somehow. But this has not this form. So, did you expect this kind of development, Yvan?
Bon, et cela, je ne m'attendais pas. C'était une expérience super. On était une grande famille. Je retrouvais un sens de l'amitié, de la famille, avec des personnes qui viennent de divers endroits dans le monde. Et voilà, il y avait des Allemands, des Suisses, des Africains, des Nigérians, des Camerounais, voilà, des Italiens. On était tous là et on était, ce qui m'a plu, c'est la simplicité, c'est-à-dire des personnes simples, voilà, normales, qui vont dans les ghettos, on mangeait en route, on s'asseyait, on mangeait également dans les ghettos, voilà, et même les acteurs professionnels comme Maya Morgenstein ou bien Enrique Razzotti, c'était des personnes tous simples, voilà. Et il y avait, et c'est ça en fait, le film, c'était ça en fait. Le message du film se transformait également dans nous, quoi. C'est-à-dire que la solidarité, l'amitié, la famille, c'était une expérience vraiment super inoubliable. Et le fait qu'aujourd'hui ce film a des perspectives, continue, va de l'avant, déjà, c'est quelque chose de formidable et j'espère que cela va aller toujours de l'avant parce que le thème dont on a traité dans ce film, c'est un thème très, très important pour le futur de notre société parce qu'il y a tout dans ce film. Il y a la religion, il y a la politique, il y a la dignité, il y a tout dans ce film. En fait.
He didn't expect it like this, and he remembers how we came all together from Africa, Nigeria, Cameroon, from Germany, Switzerland, from Italy, and so on and so on. And we were like a family, full of solidarity. In a very and for him, the most important term would be simplicity. Everything happened in a family, in a big solidarity and simplicity, and also the so-called stars like Maya Morgenstern or Enrique Razzotti, they were just simple humans. And we ate together and we worked together and we lived together like a family. And that's why he thinks that that's the film for him, this life together in simplicity and like humans, like working. And he thinks that's why this film works, because in his opinion, everything is in. So the belief, the revolt, the dignity, and he thinks that that this is the beginning of something that goes on and goes on, and that's he didn't expect it at all, that it would be like this.
Okay, another question from the audience, and this one is about violence and the representation of violence. You talk about changing the system within which we operate. Should we also strive towards moving away from the images we so well know? And when is the representation of violence a step too far?
That's a very difficult question, because I think that's in the entering a space that is an individual space, the space of the viewer, and I can't answer to it, because I think for many people it would be too metaphorical, and for others it would be too explicit. And I personally just can say that we have to be aware that we are living in a extremely violent society, but we found ways, the elite of Western Europe and of North America, to export this violence to spaces we will not see. The violence against humans, the violence against, of course, animals, the violence against nature. And I always felt the need to re-import in front of us the violence which is the basis of our way of living since so many time. And it's getting more and more and more violent. And for me, I always had a cathartic point of view concerning violence, which is perhaps the biblical point of view, who would say only through physical violence transcendence can arrive. And I don't say it in an esoteric way, in a very direct way. And of course, it's also a topic, I mean, we are talking about a story that ends that somebody will be killed by the most violent you can kill a human being in all human history. We are talking about the crucifixion. I know that today crucifixion is just a little metaphor, and it became a way of talking about everything. You are crucified when it's a bit too hot outside or whatever, but it's that's what it means, you know. And the last point for me is that how to describe the extreme violence that exists in South Italy towards these people, how to describe it in a film, because and there we have a problem as filmmakers, I think, that all these images of ghettos and of people working in the heat and of people drowning and people talking about it, and you know, we know it, and how to translate this to something that would be unbearable as the violence is unbearable, that happens every second of every day. That's my thoughts about it. But yeah.
Is then the purpose of art to make the what should be or what is perceived as unrepresentable representable and therefore bearable, or is it to make this representable and still maintain that it is unbearable?
Yeah, and also change it. I think it's you can't only do a film that is super violent and criticizes violence without trying to change through the representation, or let's say the tool you reproduce, to reform the system in a way that less violence would happen. And even if it's only 1%, or you know, even if it's not a lot, even if it's only for these 100 or 200 people that Yvan was mentioning in the very beginning, that live in other contexts now and is not exposed to this violence anymore because we made a film about this violence. So you can't think the representation of violence without any dialectic of what you do with the system that produces it and how you change the system. It would be like I don't know. It would make absolutely no sense, you know. That's for me the difference of the film of Mel Gibson and our film. The film of Mel Gibson is super violent, but what did it change besides the very naturalistic representation of this violence? But what for? I don't understand this politically. I don't understand this act, but I understand our act, and you can do as if you misunderstand it, and perhaps you are touched and you don't get it. But I think we really try to do an act, or we're still trying to do an act that in itself tries to be consequent. But still there is a lot of let's say, sadistic quality in it. There's still of coincidence, you know? And yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly something of Carol Martin's theater of the real within your work always, in how it collects and creates documents, but it also illustrates it illustrates real world occurrences, even if through constructed performative means. And there's a lot of power and strength in that. As we're nearing the end of our hour and a half, I'm going to turn over to both of you the question of, is looking back on this entire project, with knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently, if anything?
Perhaps Ivan can start. I have to think about it, because there are at the same time many things, and in the end it is what it is. So it's you can't just take one stone out of it and say I would have done it differently. But yeah.
Ma è una domanda difficile. Excuse-moi Milo, c'est une demande, c'est une question difficile. Qu'est-ce que on aurait pu changer dans le film si on retournait? Bon, voilà, je pense que le film, il est bien comme il a été fait. Je ne trouve rien à redire, disons. Il ne me vient rien de particulièrement concret. Mais ce que je peux dire, c'est que peut-être on devait plus encore parler, voir les conditions des travailleurs et tout, mais ce n'était pas notre faute, parce que ce n'est pas difficile de travailler dans un contexte mafieux. Parce que voilà, il y a la mafia qui nous interdisait d'entrer dans les ghettos et tout, et tout, et tout. Ce dont on a vu dans le film, c'est justement la partie minime des problèmes qui existent vraiment. On voulait montrer tous ces grands problèmes, et on a eu des difficultés à le faire parce que on recevait des menaces, quoi. Voilà.
Yeah, thank you, Ivan. Actually, that's it. I think I would have said the same. So what is missing in the film, we show only a little part of the conditions of workers, because it's just impossible in this mafia context, for example, prostitution work, to show it. I mean, you can invent, but to really show it, it's even after years, it's difficult. And this part, it could be even a own film to only show the conditions of the workers. That can't be enough.
All right. Then I think that seems like a good word to wrap up on. So I'd like to thank both Milo and Yvan for joining us and taking part in this conversation. I'd like to thank Frank for being here, if only visually and in spirit.
And we will have much more discussions. Yeah.
Of course. And thank you to everyone who took the time to listen this evening, this afternoon, this morning, depending where in the world you are. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you all.
Thank you, Giacomo, for translating all the time. And merci, Yvan.
Merci à toi, Milo. Merci à vous, et merci à tous ceux qui sont restés tard dans la nuit en Italie avec le fuseau horaire pour suivre ce débat très très beau.
Yeah, thank you everybody to fight with us in Italy and everywhere. And I add, thank you, Lily. Thank you, Frank.